Hello and welcome to episode 341 of the Stacey West Podcast. My name is Gary. I shall be your host for this evening, and I am joined by what could probably be described as a partner in crime after the last couple of seasons, I would imagine. Chris Lamming, how are you, sir?
Hello. Yeah, I'm all right. Thank you. I know normally we have a little bit of witty banter.
Yeah, let's do that.
Before we start talking about football. But I have to say, on straight into the football, really, I feel quite philosophical about yesterday. So we're going to discuss that, aren't we? In terms of how you view the game individually is going to be ultimately what you take away from that, and there's no real right answer. But yeah, I certainly feel different about it today than I did yesterday, and I think that's probably going to be the case for a lot of people. But today, me and my good lady, we did an escape room this morning, and then we had a meal out. Just moments to spare. And
what happens if you don't? You
stay there in there forever. Yeah, until the end of time.
We should get Dave to do an escape room on his own. There's no way he'd figure it out. He'd just be banging at the door like a gorilla on his cage, wouldn't he? Let me out. That's not how you get out, Dave.
They are good fun. Anyway. They are good fun. But that was our job today, to Christmas shopping. So yeah, it's been like as far away from football as I've been at a weekend, to be honest, this Sunday. Other than, of course, getting back and prepping for this. But yeah, how's your weekend been?
I did a considerable amount of man shit. Not like literally. Like I was chainsawing yesterday, and I was building fires yesterday, and I was doing tip runs. And today I've been off doing, I don't know if it's man stuff. I mean, in the brave new world, what is man stuff, really, isn't it? We were all the same. But I was doing the Christmas card run to the family today, and then I did a literal run, because I do run 15 kilometers around basically the Lincolnshire Wolds, which was really nice. And then I've come back, and now I'm sitting here talking to you. So it's been hectic. I fell asleep on the sofa a little bit last night as well, watching Reservoir Dogs. So I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll watch Reservoir Dogs. And I got to the bit where they were talking about, have you seen Reservoir Dogs? I assume you have.
No, I haven't. I'm rubbish at films. I've seen a select few films that I really like. And then all the big ones that everyone always references, I just never have. I've never seen Star Wars. I know I'd like Star Wars. I know I'd like Lord of the Rings. Never seen the first or second. So never really got into it. Yeah, but I know I'd like it from what I've heard. But I've never seen them. And I appreciate this is probably going to really offend some people. But yeah, I just never got around to it. And then I feel like I'm massively behind, and it's quite a big undertaking then to catch up. So I just never did.
Have you ever seen any Tarantino films?
Yes.
Which ones?
Now you put me under the pressure, aren't you? Name some, and I'll say whether I have or haven't.
Pulp Fiction?
No.
Kill Bill?
Yes.
Django Unchained?
Yes. Excellent.
Inglourious Bastards?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you need to see Reservoir Dogs. The point is that I was making was that I got to the bit where they were talking about how Mr. Pink doesn't tip. And then I fell asleep. And then I realized that that's the bit that plays before the main title credits come on. So I literally lasted about 10 minutes, I think. So, yeah, that was basically my weekend. So there we go. Right. Well, there we go. That's the we'd say witty banter, but it's more like
there wasn't a lot of interesting stuff there, was there? Let's be honest.
No, not really. I mean, there's literally nothing funny that's happened, I don't think. I took a photo of a sunset. I'm not sure that's particularly amusing. So we can talk predominantly about football. Which is going to be nice. Yeah, let's do that. Because that was one of the other man things that I did yesterday. And again, it's not just a man thing. This is just my stereotypical perception of the world. But I settled down to watch some footy in front of a fire that I had built. And I genuinely believed that it was footy I was going to watch where Lincoln City were going to not have the ball very often. We were going to be put under pressure quite a lot. And if we came away with a point, it would be glorious. And yet for the second time at the McAlpine Stadium in something like 3 visits, we've come away with a 2-2 draw that feels like a defeat. And that's the reality of it. And there's lots that we're going to unpack from the game. And we'll start with team selection, because finally a lot of people got their wish, and Bailey Cadamarteri got his start.
Yeah, it was massive, really. I think that's been a discussion pretty much all the season, hasn't it? In regards to, we've got this strength in depth in the front line now. We have options up there. Which two do you pick? And the answer, it turns out, is pick three. So Bailey Cadamarteri started up top with Jovan Makama, with Ben House tucking just in behind. We're going to touch on Ben House's role a little bit later, if that's okay, because I thought it was really, really interesting. And once we moved away from that later in the game, I think, not saying that's the sole reason why Huddersfield got back into the game, they were just significantly better after half time, but I think he had a role to play. It was really interesting. But yeah, I think that was the huge surprise for us all. Reading the lineup and now before kickoff is, hang on a minute, there's three centre forwards on the team sheet here. Who on earth is playing where? And as it turned out, not a huge amount was different, but it was a little bit different. So we kind of played our regular back three with wing backs. We had two holding midfielders in Arahan and Magrandos, with House tucked in behind the front two. So it's still a 3-5-2, but it was with a 10 and 2 behind rather than a 6 and 2 in front. So similar to what we've been doing before. But of course, what that really meant is that Jack Moylan kind of lost his place to Ben House in a way, didn't he? Rather than to another midfielder.
Yeah, I don't think it was particularly unusual. If you remember, in the early days of Ben House's first full season, there was a lot of discussion about where the club actually saw Ben and who we were then going to sign at the time. And it was lots of people seeing Ben House as an attacking midfielder, as a 10 or maybe an 8, but he's kind of got a lot of qualities that allow him to play there. So I think when I saw the team sheet, we had our little Stacey West WhatsApp group chat. And I sort of said, well, it's 3-5-2, isn't it? And that's where House is going to play. He's going to play just tucked in behind. I actually think it's his best position, because we had a discussion, I think it was at the under-18s game the other week, that Ben House is a good footballer. And what he brings to the side, you want in the side. So the high press, he can pop up with goals. His work rate is utterly phenomenal. But actually, he's not a pacey centre forward that's going to get in behind. He's not the big centre forward you can aim for and you can pick bits and pieces up from. And I think sometimes that's why we've suffered a little bit in an attacking sense, because he doesn't fit, in my mind, the stereotypical one of two in a partnership. And so for him to be playing in the 10 behind, and then for us to be able to have a partnership of Jovan, ball sticks too big, hold up play, Bailey Cadamarteri spins the defender, looks to get down the sides, looks to get in behind, I think it was the perfect setup, and I would not be surprised if we stick with that rather over the next couple of weeks.
I'd certainly expect to see it again with it working so well. I don't know if I totally agree in that. I don't think Ben's best position is as a centre forward. I appreciate maybe his skill set isn't that of a traditional kind of profile of a striker. You know, the typical little man, big man partnership. He's kind of neither directly in terms of the specifics, but he's really unique. I think we miss a little bit in terms of putting pressure right on the very kind of our front line, their back line, if he's playing just in behind. But I also don't think he was really playing as a traditional 10 yesterday either. It was almost like a 9.5, if that is such a thing, because he was tucked just in behind Jovan and Bailey, but he wasn't kind of floating, trying to get the ball deeper, like a traditional number 10. Dare I say, if Jack Moylan was playing in that role, like Jack Moylan would. What he did in possession is he did kind of push up centrally when he had opportunity to do so, which allowed Jovan and Bailey to play slightly wider, which I think is something that we always quite like. We quite like our centre forwards to play quite wide at times and link with what is normally our wide 8 and our wing back, to create those little triangles there. And we mentioned this all the way back. I think it was in the Harrogate game, actually, such a long time ago now, that feels. Lots has happened since then. But maybe a little criticism of the team at that point is that our centre forwards seem to be really far apart from each other width-wise. What this allows in this particular setup was that it allowed those centre forwards to drift wider. That created gaps between the centre backs of Huddersfield, because Ben House was able to kind of penetrate that kind of central area when we had the ball. I don't think you'd see any other player in our team that was playing in that role would play it in the same way. They'd probably be slightly deeper. So in possession, I thought it was interesting because it was almost like he was sometimes almost playing in the front line as a kind of a really almost three centre forwards, but at times he was playing in that kind of midfield role. But it was out of possession. I thought it was really interesting. So what we found is that Cadamartri and Makama were kind of occupying the two outside centre backs, because Huddersfield also played a 3-5-2, particularly in the first half. They did change later in the second. But ultimately, they had a back three, which is the key point here. So Jovan and Bailey were occupying the outside centre backs. And Ben House was kind of doing two jobs. He was blocking the passing lane between Helik, the central centre back, and Kasumu, who, by the way, was utterly outstanding for Huddersfield Town. Kasumu is brilliant. They're deep lying midfielder. But he was between the two, kind of blocking the passing lane. Now, that's hard work. So clearly we're doing that because you want to stop Kasumu getting the ball. Normally, what would happen? You think, well, we need to stop a key player. You go and mark him. You stand directly behind him. You stay tight. You don't give him space on the ball. That's the traditional way of doing that. But actually, we played with Ben in front of him. So Ben had to be really tactically aware to be able to block off the passing lane that's behind him. You know, he can't see, hasn't got eyes in the back of his head, but he kind of has to be able to block off the lane into him. But it also allows him to then react to the trigger points and press the central back or go and help out wide when the ball does go out there. It was such an intelligent role. And there's no one else on the team that could do that role, by the way. He is the only player I think that we have in our squad that is capable of doing that. But it was really highly technical. So I thought it was really interesting.
So just to sum up, he was better in that role than he was up front, which is kind of what I said, but just in loads of...
No, not necessarily. But I think the role he played yesterday in this exact game... No, I'm not agreeing with you. In this exact game, suited him. And there's no one else that could play the role. It was interesting because I don't think any of us would expect it. You're saying that it suits him, but you would not for a chance. You were expecting that before kickoff or before the team sheet was announced. I certainly wasn't. But when the game started and we saw the setup and saw exactly how it was doing it was really interesting because he wasn't a 10, he wasn't a midfielder, but he also wasn't a striker. He was in between, but out of possession. It was out of possession once again with Ben House that really, really impressed me. But he also scored a goal, but got on the end of an absolutely incredible move.
Yeah, it was a good move. And I remember watching it unfolding thinking, I remember we'd watch training and they do those, the drills where it's getting out of tight situations, trying to find the player with the simple pass, and you could see that in action all over the field. Because Huddersfield weren't brilliant in the first half, let's be honest, but they're a decent side. I mean, they were still closing down, and I thought we were just outstanding. And in those moments, actually, I thought Ethan Arahan, right in the middle of it all. I mean, he was outstanding as well. You talked about Kasumu, but I thought he was absolutely superb, Arahan, yesterday.
Oh, he was, yeah.
And it was just a phenomenal move. Obviously found Tendai out wide. Great delivery from Tendai, good header from Ben House. But it was, if you just look at the last bit, the cross and the header, you go, oh, that's a decent goal. But if you watch the whole thing unfold over 2 minutes, perhaps like minute and a half, 2 minutes of football, yeah, it was outstanding. I don't know if anybody's counted up the passes as yet, but there must have been 20 or 30 passes between us getting the ball and us putting it in the back of the net.
Yeah, and there wasn't a single pass that didn't have a purpose either, because you sometimes see. I can't remember which it was now. There's one I watched a couple of years ago. I imagine it was a Man City one. And there was something like 40 passes. But on all seriousness, 30 of them were between their back line. And don't get me wrong, I understand that you pass the ball to move the opposition. It's not just kind of passing for the sake of passing. But not a lot really happened until the last 3 or 4 passes, and it was bang, 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 goal. Whereas this, we were in a tight couple of situations, got out of it really well, worked it on the other side, great ball in. Every single pass had a purpose. And there was only a couple that were kind of deep. Most of them were around the halfway line or, of course, into the opposition. It was half. It was best goal of the season for me by a country mile. And I think it just goes to show what this squad is capable of. You know, we're a young team. We're going to be inconsistent. It's almost impossible to play like that in and out possession for 90 minutes. But it goes to show we've got it in the locker. And that was really, really pleasing. And I think the most pleasing part of this was we scored when we were on top, which is something we haven't done for a little while. We were on top for the majority of that first half, but particularly in that moment, and we got a goal when we was on top. And an unexpected goal because I'm with you. I was expecting to get beaten by Huddersfield Town. To be honest, I said on the podcast last week that if we could get a draw, I'd be absolutely delighted. A boring nothing happens 0-0 would have been perfect for me. So to go a goal up was unexpected for me. Absolutely delighted, but also it was nothing less than we deserved from that opening period.
Correct, yeah, correct. And then of course we went 2 goals up, and for a minute, I had Barnsley in my head because we were tearing them apart. I mean, Matty Pearson, they said he'd been ill in the run-up to the game. That always comes out when someone has a stinker to protect them. Bear in mind, very few people probably remember Matty Pearson playing for us twice against Carl Sholton, home and away, when he was a young man on loan from Blackburn Rovers. But he was having a nightmare. And again, Bailey Cadamarteri he'd got the boss of him. But I thought Rico was looking outstanding on the left flank in the first half. He was a constant menace. They just didn't know what to do with us. But we didn't convert that into chance after chance after chance. What we did was take our time and create killer chances. And the next big chance that we had was the killer chance. Now, I actually think it's harsh for it to be put down as an own goal.
Yeah, it is.
I don't know if it has been still. I haven't checked the BBC website. I don't know what the official thing is, but it's a shot on target that's been directed into goal. Now, normally an own goal is where the ball isn't aimed at the frame of the goal and it's deflected into the back of the net. So I'm giving it to Bailey Cadamarteri. And so if anyone wants to argue with me on the dubious goals panel, they can do that. You can get me at www.idon'tgiveashit.com/Bailey scored the goal. But it was a lovely team move again. And we talk about the free-flowing team move for the first goal. If you look at some of the little touches just in and around the area, the ball comes in. I think there's a little flick. I think Jovan's involved. I think Ben House is involved before Bailey puts it in the back of the net. It's I find it actually frustrating because I see that happen and I think we've got that in our locker, but it just seems that we can only produce it at. I'm not one of those people that goes, why can't we do that all the time? Because football's not like that. You can't do that
because there's an opposition there
there's
as
an
well.
opposition, but I'm just looking at that thinking, we are so good in patches. We are so good. We play some lovely football. People are going, oh, we're hoofing it long, we're doing this and that. But on that big pitch against a team that allowed us to kind of play a little bit of football, we looked for the weaknesses. We absolutely hammered those weaknesses. And there was nobody saying about our lack of clinicality, which I'm told is a word, so I'll roll with it. But there was nobody moaning about that because we've had 0.3 XG in the first half and we've scored 2 goals and they're both outstanding goals that we deserved at the time.
0.8 XG if you actually include Bailey's goal. Because if on Y-Scout, I looked into this, it's shots that are blocked don't count, and that was officially a shot that was blocked, so it didn't count as an towards the XG. So it's 0.8 overall, with including that one off FOTMob. And FOTMob, I don't know how official it is, it does give Bailey Cadamarteri the goal, so that's nice, and that's even today. So you'd like to think that's perspective.
So I've done it. FOTMob's done it, so you can argue.
So it's definitely Bailey's goal. No, I'm not arguing. I'm telling you, it is his goal. I'm not disagreeing with you this time.
No, sorry, this isn't just me and you in this conversation. There's 37 people watching, and up to 1,000 will listen and watch over the course of the next week. So I was just saying it for their benefit, not for your benefit. But sorry,
I do sometimes forget people watch and listen. Sometimes I think it's just you and me talking. I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, yeah. So a couple of things, really. Firstly, yes, it was good. There's no denying it was good. We don't need to kind of go too superlative with it. It was excellent. We were clinical. That's a good thing. So we haven't been as much recently. I'd argue we've done a lot of the things that got us to that point in previous games, not for all 90 minutes, but sometimes only in very small patches. But we hadn't put that finishing kind of piece there. But we did on Saturday, and that was really pleasing. Now, just to kind of highlight that, I think, in terms of domination, we did absolutely dominate that first half. So in the box, we had 16 touches in the opposition box. They only had 3 in ours in the first half. That's massive kind of disparity there. We had 7 shots. 6 of them were inside the area, so there were good quality chances in good positions. Huddersfield had 2 shots. Only one of them was actually inside the box at all. So we were really, really good and in the first half. But one question is, why can't we do it all the time? Because they're human. And so are the opposition. And football's an emotional game. Also, it's a physical game. You get tired physically and mentally, which I think doesn't always get appreciated. It's really, really difficult to keep your concentration for 90 minutes, to keep that speed of thought as much as it is to keep it in your legs. And also, I think one thing that we have been good at all season is we are good at exploiting weaknesses in teams. When a team does give us a weakness, does give us an option to pin them in or to exploit a particular an area of the pitch, I think we're pretty good at that. We've seen that more so against maybe the slightly lesser teams. Reminds me a little bit of when we just effectively bullied Shrewsbury last year in that 3-0 win, where we were just a cut above them. They couldn't get out of their own third. I think we've got that in the locker. I think there was two things at play in the first half. We were good, and there's no denying that. We were set up well. Tactically was spot on. Application was really good. Team selection was clearly spot on. But also Huddersfield had a player who was, in inverted commas here, unwell, but certainly underperforming in Matty Pearson. We absolutely exploited that part of the pitch. That wasn't the only part of the pitch that we played well in, but we did exploit that part of the pitch. Kadamatri was rinsing it in behind round that corner a lot.
Yeah. I mean,
but also Huddersfield.
I would just say Matty Pearson was shit. So sorry, Karen.
but Huddersfield were below par. They were certainly nowhere near the level that we expected from them. Partly that was because we were probably very, very good, but also let's not forget there are always two teams that play here, and they're not fourth for no reason, and they're not unbeaten now in 10 for no reason. They're a good side. They've got good footballers. So I was fully expecting them to come out in the second half and be improved from where they were in the first half. The question was, could we keep our performance levels up? And I think it was almost impossible to play in the same way when Huddersfield were changing how they played, both kind of in terms of application, but also in possession as well. So there was lots different in the second half, but of course we're going to touch on that. But at half time, Gaz, how did you feel? I'm interested to learn. What was your thoughts? Right, we're 2-0 up. Now what happens now in the second half? Because I thought it was going to be a much different second half. I didn't know what the score was going to be. I'm not going to say I predicted a 2-2 or anything along those lines, but I thought it'd be tough. But how did you feel after watching that first half? Because I was delighted with the performance.
I was hungry, so I made 2 bits of pizza that I left on Thursday night, which was good. So I try not to overanalyze. I mean, I don't know how I felt. I felt happy that we were 2-0 up, but I'm always nervous until the points are in the bag. I didn't think that they would come out firing quite as much as they did. And I think everything hinged on the first 10 minutes of the game. Because I think had they come out and I expected them to come out and have a little go, have a little poke. But I didn't expect them to score. And I think had they not scored in the first 5-10 minutes of the half, I think we'd have won the game. And I know that sounds ridiculous because it was 2-1. So if they hadn't, you know what I mean? It would have been 2-1 rather than 2-2. But I think it changed the balance of everything. I think if they come out and we just nullify them and it's crap for 10 minutes in the first beginning of the second half, I think their crowd should turn again because there was boos at half time. The fact is they had to come out, they had to go hard. They came out, they went hard, they got a goal, which, I mean, there's been criticism, I think a little bit of criticism of Tendai. I watched it back, Bailey, because Tendai's gone, I can see your face. So Tendai's obviously rushed out, given the free kick away, and then he's caught in no man's land between 2 players, and the ball goes back out wide.
Yeah, but why is he caught out of position? It's because Ethan Arahan gives the ball back to Huddersfield when Tendai's out of position. Now, I'm not here to criticise Ethan because Ethan was absolutely outstanding yesterday. But if he just walks away from the ball, it gives us 5 seconds to get back into shape, and that goal doesn't happen. He's given the ball back to Huddersfield. And they've been smart by taking it quickly, by the way, and exploited Tendai, who has then got 2 players to think about. He's either goes and presses the ball carrier and leaves the winger free, or he tracks the winger and leaves the ball carrier free. He gets caught between the 2 because he had 2 jobs to do. And it was a good cross and a good header. But I'm not here to say it was all Ethan Arahan's fault, but Ethan Arahan shouldn't give the ball back.
If Bailey Kadamatri tracks his man and defends it, then the ball doesn't go in either. But he stood and watched the centre back go into the. He's been caught ball watching basically, like Dom Jeffries was against. I want to say Rotherham. Been caught ball watching.
Yeah. So there was a couple of things that were kind of like disappointing, but things that happen in a fluid, fast-paced game of football. It's no one's direct fault. It's not like, and all the stats. It's not none of that's going to go down as a goal directly at the fault of any individual Lincoln City player. But there was a couple of things at play there, which we maybe would be disappointed about looking back. Simply, in my opinion, if you stop them taking the free kick quickly and allow your teammates to get into position, you have the setup to be able to deal with it. You either stop the cross in its first instance, or you're in a better position to deal with the cross when it comes in. So that was disappointing, but it's nothing less than I expected in terms of Huddersfield having a go in the second half, like you said. But I completely agree with you in that early goal changed the whole complexion of the match, didn't it? Because I thought if we could have kept them quiet for 15 minutes, we'd have been able to see it out. But as soon as that goal went in, well, I couldn't take my eyes off the game. It's probably the most, I've obviously been invested in every single game that I watch, but it's probably the most invested that I've felt. It's the highest my heart rate has been probably in any match this season. I could not take my eyes off it for a moment. It was encapsulating, which is brilliant. That's what you want football to be, but it was encapsulating for all the reasons that I was terrified that Huddersfield were going to score again.
So there's been criticism of the substitutions. So let's talk about those before we talk about the goal. Makama, 64 minutes, comes off and Ethan Hamilton comes on. And it amazes me that people that were calling Makama 3 weeks ago are now saying we shouldn't have taken him off at that stage. And we brought Hamilton on, who's, it's not an attacking substitution, but that's on 64 minutes. So that's 20 minutes into the second half. I've then seen criticism of Bailey Cadamarteri coming off 72 minutes. So that's with 18 minutes plus stoppages, 26 minutes left. So he's played 27 minutes of the half, I believe. So he's come off exactly halfway after 17 actions, 7 successful, replaced by Draper, involved in 17 actions, 6 successful. So there was absolute parity between the two of those, almost in minutes and actions. And then obviously late on, Dom Jeffries comes on for Ben House, which was clearly a defensive substitution. But again, there's a discussion that is a negative substitution. Were they the right changes, bearing in mind the other players on the bench with Jack Moylan, Eric Ring and Tyler Walker?
In terms of the players that came on, were they of the profile that we needed in this match, in the situation we was in? I think they probably were. I understand why you bring the centre forwards off, because you need fresh legs at the top end of the pitch. You want to try and change things up. And also we have a deep squad that you want to get kind of minutes into. But I do actually think the changes disrupted our out of possession structure. In possession, I don't think it changed a huge amount. I don't think Bailey Cadamarteri was getting anywhere near as much joy in the second half after Huddersfield put Brodie Spencer in that role to replace
Pearson.
Thank you, Pearson. So I'm not saying he was ineffective. I thought Bailey was really good. I thought Jobin was really good. I thought they complemented each other really, really well. But when Ben House then went into that forward role and out of his 10, 9, 9.5 role he was in before, I did think that's when we started to see Kasumi get on the ball a lot more. Now, he was good for the majority of the game. He was the only player in the first half, really, for Huddersfield that did anything good. But he seemed to have a bigger and bigger and bigger influence as the game went on. And I don't know if that's me just putting 2 and 2 together and getting 20, or maybe there's an element there of someone who has either not been doing it for 70 minutes, so hasn't quite got into the movement, or is coming on and playing a slightly deeper role in Hamilton. I certainly don't think Hamilton was playing as a 10. So, yeah, I think it did change the complexion of it. I'm not saying it was the wrong decision, but I'm happy to admit that it had an impact on the game, certainly. But you can't not make a change for 90 minutes when Huddersfield are making changes left, right and centre, bringing fresh legs on, changing shape, changing personnel. Like, you have to counter that. There's no point having a squad otherwise. You're at a disadvantage, just fitness-wise, if nothing else, if you don't make those changes. But I do think it had an impact on it a little bit, yeah, certainly on our attacking structure.
Now, I've picked up Steve Banks' question here, and I think it's a question where I'm going to make no secret of what I think. Do we agree Rowan got away with a Stonewall penalty second half? Absolutely, 100%. It was a Stonewall penalty. Huddersfield should have had a penalty, should have been level. And at that point, I'm beginning to wonder if our luck is in. I mean, he's made no attempt to get to the ball. I thought Sean Rowan, by the way, was excellent yesterday from start to finish in the second half as well. And actually, you talk about out of possession, talk about Ben Howe, all of this sort of stuff. But actually, the back three they did everything they needed to in the first half, but for me they really came to the fore in the second half, even late on after the goal when Monsma decided that he was going to start being an arsehole and falling out with people, because it broke the game up when there was massive momentum, but we'll come to that. So I thought Rowan was really good. It's not the only penalty we got away with. There's one I've looked back on Y Scout this morning where there's a Jova Makama has thrown somebody to the floor. And, hand on heart, I can't criticise the Rotherham goal being allowed for a holding block, and then say, well, it's all right because we got away with it. Those things have evened themselves out. So there we've got a point, whereas we would probably not. There you go. I know what I'm trying to say. So I'm not going to be a hypocrite in this situation, but it's an out-and-out penalty, and we've got away with one.
Yeah, we have. We've got away with two. I agree with you there. What I will say, I'm not saying this justifies the penalty decisions, by the way, but the referee was allowing a lot of physicality in the game, which I didn't mind, by the way. It was fair for both sides. I've got a little gripe with the ref later in the game, which you disagree with, but overall, I thought the ref was pretty good. I think he allowed the game to flow. It always suits us when the game is allowed to flow as well. I think certainly when we're on the front foot, we're quite good when the game has got a little bit of chaos about it and it's kind of end to end. That's when we really thrive. I think the referee allowed that at times. I think maybe there's a couple of question marks in the first 5-10 minutes of the game. And then I think everyone realised, he's just letting those sort of things go. And that's that. So I think he certainly set his stall out in allowing a greater degree of physicality, generally speaking. Because one thing I have a real peeve about is the fact that when a foul is given outside the box, but the exact same foul isn't given inside the box because it happens to be in the box, but it's almost like the threshold of a penalty needs to be a worse foul for it to be given. So I don't like that. These are still both penalties, by the way. But I think he set his stall out in regards to allowing a little bit of extra physicality compared to maybe what most referees would do. So which is maybe lends to the decision that was made an element there. But ultimately, they were both fouls. And we would have no complaints if Huddersfield were given a penalty in either of those situations. No.
So let's segue nicely into the bit that we're going to disagree about, because it's Huddersfield's goal. There's anger at Huddersfield's goal, because the ball hits the referee. He takes the ball, and then there are two different interpretations of what happens next. So I'll let you give your interpretation of what happens between that moment and the ball ending up in the back of the net. And then I will give my interpretation, and then we'll move on and agree to disagree.
Yeah, good. And that's what everyone should do, isn't it? Hey, what I will say is I'm clutching at straws a little bit here, but I do think I've got a little bit of a point. So firstly, the rule these days is if the ball hits the referee, it's a drop ball, but it's not a contested drop ball, as you will have seen years gone by. It's a drop ball which is uncontested, so it's dropped to the team who were in possession of the ball. That's the rule. It has been for the last 2 or 3 years now, and so I had no complaints when the ball hit the ref. The play was going to restart with a drop ball to Huddersfield, pretty much on the edge of the box. But it's almost like the referee was like a Huddersfield player wanting to get the ball down and play really quickly. So he didn't drop the ball; he rolled the ball really quickly. I don't mind the ref keeping the game flowing, but it almost felt like that was a little bit in favour of Huddersfield, though they were in possession of the ball in the first place. So, but the other bit is he rolled it rather than dropping it. That's not the rule. The rule is that you drop it from hip height. That's more difficult to control than a ball that's on the floor. Little tiny bits of detail potentially make a difference. And then he got in the bloody way. So I think it was Ethan Hamilton, not 100% sure, but the nearest Lincoln City play was then between the referee and the ball. So the player couldn't press the ball. And then, of course, it gets worked out wide. Goal comes in after a couple of unlucky deflections. Ball just evades Sean Rowan. Pawdy comes out to meet it, gets a touch on it, deflects it away from George Wickens, who gets a foot on it, but it couldn't keep it out. He was kind of powerless, really. And it just went into the roof of the net. I actually thought Wickens had saved it for a moment as well when it happened. And I was gutted when it went in. Absolutely gutted. But yes, as mentioned, clutching at straws, Huddersfield absolutely deserved a point. But if we're talking about this as a specific incident, now I've already credited the referee for an overall decent performance, but it was a little frustrating in the moment, I must admit.
I'm watching it back while you're going on. And he drops it from knee height. He doesn't roll it.
He rolls it. He rolls the ball.
I'm literally looking at it right now on the screen. And he kind of drops it. He doesn't roll it along the floor. I'm literally watching it now. I can see the bounce. There's the bounce. And it bounces twice. And the player has to bring it under control and step backwards. Granted, when the player steps backwards, Hamilton is the wrong side of the referee, but he gets round. And then by the time players moved on in seconds, he's challenging for the ball with no direct passing lane whatsoever. And so for me, I can understand why there's a little bit of anger about it. But it is compared to the penalty, it's such a minor situation. And the thing is, I remember at the time, as it was unfolding, going, we won't be happy if they score from that because that hasn't been done properly. Usually it's a reset as well. So it was quite quick the way that he did it, and I'll buy that. But even when he drops the ball right there, and drops or roll, but it's a drop. It's gone off my screen now. We had nearly all our players behind the ball. And it's not on the edge of the area. It's 10 yards outside the area. So you're talking 30 yards from goal. You know what? Not having it. And I'd love to. I'd absolutely love to. All those Rotherham fans that were on my case the other week because I was anti-Rotherham. I'd love it to be. I just can't moan about that because at the end of the day, I don't think anything major has happened there that's wrong, particularly. So after the goal, I messaged, we'll move on from that. After the goal, I messaged you and said, we're going to lose this because I really felt they've got momentum. It was 8 minutes. I thought we were beginning to look a little shell shocked. I mean, the fact is they'd still only had 2 shots on target in the second half and they'd both gone in, by the way. So Wigan saved 1 in the first half. And then it all got a little bit tasty up the other end of the field. Now, I've seen rumours and reports of Lewis Monsma allegedly spitting at Heilig. People who were behind the goal said he didn't, but he was in his ear and said something. Heilig was absolutely incensed and he lost his head. And I tell you something, if Monsma's done that on purpose, it's absolute genius because it broke the game up completely. I mean, there must have been 2 to 3 minutes of the 8 minutes that were taken up by stupidity in the area and pushing and shoving and people chasing each other around. And dead on 8 minutes, the referee blew his whistle. And that, I saw Michael Duff go straight to the referee. He was complaining at the end about that. For me, there's a lot of criticism about game management. And I think Michael Scabala has said, I'm trying to teach them game management or something in his post-match. Doesn't need to teach anything, does he, to Monsma and to a couple of the others, because I thought we broke it up absolutely spot on.
I agreed. Yeah, I thought it was really smart because I didn't actually see your message until after the game. I couldn't pick up my phone. I was glued to the screen. But yeah, I don't know if I'd have felt that I thought we was going to lose it, but we was massively up against it, weren't we? We were backs against the wall for the majority of the second half, and it got kind of worse and worse and worse. And we got that little breakdown the other end of the pitch, and we absolutely managed that situation as well as we possibly could, other than scoring, obviously. But in terms of stopping Huddersfield's momentum, yeah, it was really smart. And we mentioned, a couple of those kind of game management things earlier in the game that potentially could nullify. I mentioned the first goal particularly, but yeah, in that moment in time, there's no criticism of that. And it's probably the unseen part of football at times, or it's not noticed that it's intentional. Sometimes it's blatantly intentional when you see like the likes of Chris Maguire do it, and it goes over the top, and it's not even really in the right context, but at the right time in the right way, it makes a difference, doesn't it? And you've got to all be on the same page with it a lot of the time. But yeah, I think I can't comment on whether Lewis did or not spit on Heilig. What I will say is I would be hugely surprised if he did. I just don't think Lewis Monsma is that sort of player. We've never seen anything of that sort. He's never really been petulant in any way, shape or form. So having a word in his ear, having a little tug here and there, doing something to piss him off, absolutely. You know what I
mean? Easy. I don't want to see that.
But no, absolutely not. But yeah, if he's doing something off the ball that's frustrating, then that makes total sense. Loads of stuff happens in the 18-yard box, but to see him do something or hear allegations of that, I'd be, that is 100% innocent until proven guilty, because I just don't think he's that sort of player. Never done anything to suggest he would be, but it was well managed nonetheless.
It must be something about the McAlpine or the John Smiths or whatever they want to call it, because 3 of the last 4 games where we've been when we've been there have just descended into some sort of chaos on the final whistle. There was the 2-1 defeat with Pavel Havertz's offside goal, and there was obviously scenes at the end, people win the referees, all that sort of stuff. There was the 2-2 draw in the playoffs later in the season where Kevin Ellison lumps a fan as he runs on the field, and it's all colourful and tasty again. And then there was this game where there was Lou Monsma was in it with some staff, and everybody was going up to the referee. He was for a man who I don't think had a terrible game all the way through. He seemed to be getting an awful lot of stick from both managers. There was real needle in this. It was almost like it was a Lincoln Grimsby game, and we were top and they were second or something like that. I mean, it would never be the other way around. Do you know what I mean? There was. And I liked that. I liked that passion. And it's a shame because you come away and then obviously you go on social media and there's the usual kind of debates going on, which everybody's entitled to. But just for that moment, I wish that we had been crap in the first half and gone 2-0 down, and then in the second half had turned in the performance that we turned in, because it would have changed nothing other than 95% of people's perception of how the game went. Because we were 2-0 up at halftime and not 2-0 down at halftime, it's kind of when I say there's a lot of negativity, I'm not saying that people are entitled to that. Of course they are. People are absolutely entitled to say what they want. They can call it a shambles if they want. That's hyperbole and it's not accurate. But they can question Michael Scavali's tactics. There's a question that we're going to take in a minute if we ever get to the questions, saying has he got things wrong? I just wish, as we wrap it up now, that it had been the other way around, because at every point from Huddersfield being relegated to League One up until the 25th minute of the game yesterday, I would have taken a point. And yet, from scoring our second goal through to the 90th minute, a point feels like, oh, really? And we can all be pragmatic and we can all go, it's all right. And like you and I were both like, it's a good point. We're happy with that. But in reality, we were just a couple of minutes from beating them and being 1 point outside the playoffs going into the Christmas period.
Yeah, and we mentioned it right at the start of the podcast and feeling quite philosophical today. So looking back today, you can't argue with facts, can you? It's still a good point. They're a team that are on really good form. We haven't been in terms of points. We've argued before that performances have been okay on the whole, but at some point you have to start picking up points and wins, don't you? So today, I think, with balance, it's a great point. It's a really good point. I fully expect us to lose this game. Would have been delighted with a point. It's not even like I would take a point. I'd have been delighted with a point if you'd offered it before the game. So with that in mind, it feels like a good point, and we showed a lot of characteristics. If you're looking at the game as a whole, lots of characteristics that were really positive. But of course, you're a football fan. You concede a goal in the last minute, it bloody hurts, doesn't it? Like, I never lose my temper at football. Oh, that's a lie. I rarely lose my temper.
Yeah, that's a massive lie. Yeah.
No, when I'm managing or playing, that's very different. But watching it, I'm passionate, but I don't think I tend to be too angry. I might be frustrated or whatnot. But and I kind of punched the sofa when they scored, and it wasn't directed at anyone. It was just bugger. Really, it was. It was just it's not. I can't argue that it wasn't deserved. I can't argue that it wasn't coming. I didn't want it to happen, and it did, and it wasn't very nice, and it hurt, and I was disappointed. So the overriding feeling at full time was, that's frustrating, disappointing, despite all the real positives of the first half. Looking back today, you can see those positives in a lot clearer light, can't you?
You can.
And Michael said exactly the same, by the way, in his post-match conference. He says everyone's gutted in there, but we'll wake up tomorrow morning and probably realise it's a good point.
I didn't listen to that. Right. I should have listened to it, really, in my position as a podcaster on the subject of Lincoln City, but I didn't, because I was also incredibly pissed off. So I just wanted to go and do something. I can't remember what I did do, actually. It was probably moan about something. An incessant serial moaner. Right, we will take a quick break. If you are listening in at home, if you are one of the 34 people currently watching along, we'll have a look at a couple of comments. I actually have to make a note of what the time is now, and then we will be back with you. So thank you very much for that. Right, hang on.
44 something.
44:16. Right, I'll go through. We'll have a look at some of the comments. 44:16. Now, I don't want to reignite any argument, but Richard Pierce, he's on your side.
Thank you, Richard.
Penalty decision it seems to be. The penalty decision has no bearing on the drop ball. Both should be judged separately because the ref. Yeah, I'm not saying that there was a bearing on it at all. I'm just saying in terms of morally, they got. Do you know what I mean? I don't think that he rolled it back to them to try and give them an advantage. I just think that immorally, if there is something dubious about it, we're not in a position to argue because we got away with one anyway. Steve Banks, you sometimes need a bit of needle or an incident to motivate the team and make them play more aggressively. Potentially so. Andy Pandy, I thought the atmosphere of our fans was so good to be a part of. Great day out. If Ethan Hamilton crossed the ball to Freddie instead of shooting at the end.
Oh yeah, right at the end. That was a poor decision.
It was a poor decision. Afternoon, gents. Watching while I feel my legs gradually seizing up. Me too, Dean. I noticed you had done. Is it a half marathon you've done today? I've done a 15k with. I worked out 20% of Scarfell Pike climb. So I worked out that I climbed something like 600 feet, I believe. That might be wrong. Absolutely crazy numbers. Anyway, there we go.
Good old effort.
Yeah, well, thank you. It certainly was. Yep, so there we go. Just going back up. Good afternoon, chaps, from Neil Flower. Very, very quick one. David Larder says, if Lincoln had a Groundhog Day existence, which would you rather be stuck with? Relegation to the conference or one playoff final failure with Keith? It's got to be the playoff final
the
failure.
First one.
Yeah, because there's some positivity in that. I can't ever imagine reliving that game against Aldershot. I remember going after the game. I went and sat at the bar outside. And I won't name names, but there was a director who was just drinking and laughing and joking with people on his. Like it was honestly, oh God, I'm not a violent man, but if I'd been a violent man, I remember there was just this apathy. I could never live with that again. At least the playoff final defeats, like the Southend one, you get into Cardiff and there's people there and you're having your drinks. I got the train from there straight to holiday after the Southend defeat. Which one would you rather live? If you had to pick one of Southend or Bournemouth, which one would it be?
Bournemouth for me. I think there is even more positivity around that because getting there was winning. Like getting to the playoffs was a bonus in itself. Surviving was a bonus that season, really. So it was kind of it was dotting the I's and crossing the T's on a season that defied expectation and belief, really. And I was a Lincoln City supporter before that, of course, ever since kind of the 90s. But that's the bit, I think it was that season was my first season I had a season ticket. And that's the first season that I felt like he's really part of something, And so it all kind of encapsulated in the last game, despite the loss. I had a great day, to be honest. So despite being disappointed at the result. I
am going to pick Southend. One, because it was sunny, and two, because it moves nicely into a question from Harry Jackson earlier on as well, who said, evening, guys. Gary, when you were Poacher, I remember seeing a lady, Mrs. Poacher, who was behind the head. Everybody, basically. So originally it was the old Poacher outfit. And we got it. There was a dance troupe, if people remember, a group of dancers from Wellingborough. And one of the older dancers there wanted to do the mascot, so she took the head away and did some stuff with it and brought it back. And then it went to a friend of mine, Tim Hall's wife at the time. Now she's remarried, Beth Bevan, who did a fantastic job, put all this hair in it so Tim could go out in it. And then basically anybody who wanted to have a pop, I let them in it. And all sorts of people did it. I mean, there's a guy from Rugby, I don't know if you know him, Chris Ken Eads, an old school teacher. He lives at Apley. So Ken did it once. He did it the night we beat Hartlepool 2-0. I remember it. Why? And I thought, I was afraid he was going to die. I think he was as well. But about halfway through, he just disappeared. He went off. So Ed did it for a while. Ed Bruntlett did it. My dad had done it. Everybody. So there we go. Right. Should we think about coming back in?
Let's.
49. We'll come back in on 49.05. Brilliant. Thank you for that. Whoever has advertised on this podcast is sponsoring the Stacey West Night Out, which is happening on Saturday. We are going to Mowgli at 3:30, 4 o'clock, I think, something like that. I booked it, so I should know. And then having a very, very quiet one, seeing as I still am not quite right. from a weekend or two ago. So we have got just 15 minutes now to take some questions from the internet, and we have some questions from the internet. So we will take those. First off, Chris Keneally, of course, has asked, if it was down to you two, which of the under 18s would you give a pro contract to? Fully understand that you've not seen a massive amount of them, though. So I think the question's hard because we watched the Bolton game. You can't say that guy's good, that guy's, because they all looked relatively good in that game. So I think if I was going to pick one of those players that I think will make it, it's obvious. It's Zayn Okoro. I thought he looked head and shoulders above some of the other players at the time. If I said which other ones did I like the look of, I quite liked the right wing back. I think it's Carlton Ford, who is apparently an attacking midfielder and is only covering there through injuries. So I quite liked him. Denny Oliver looked like he'd got some real talent sitting in front of the back four. Charlie Parks was quite dominant at the back as well. They're the players that we've seen around the first team. So it's almost as if the first team manager knows which of the players is, stepping up. I don't know. So yeah, the same question to you.
Yeah, I would like to pick a different player or give a different answer just for the sake of being different, but I can't disagree with you, to be honest. Yeah, we went to the Wrexham game. That's, to be honest, the most I've been exposed to the under 18s this season, and well, for 2 or 3 seasons, and to literally have clips that are online of previous matches and on various players' profiles and things, little bits that are on the internet, and that match to go off. So it's a very, very limited amount. But yeah, I think Zayn was a real standout. That we're obviously fortunate. We've seen him a couple of times in and around the first team, of course, was involved against Chesham and, of course, scored his first goal for the club against Man City under 21s in the AFL Trophy and was outstanding in that game. So he I think has shone already. Of course, shone in the under 18s game that kind of justified that selection in the first team as well. Yeah, I'm not saying that the ones that you haven't mentioned there don't deserve a contract, but from what we've seen in that one match, I agree. They're the same players that stood out for me.
Very good. Right. Lee Imp has said you have to choose one, Tendai or Lass, and why? I'll let you answer that first.
Lass Sorensen. And I actually think Tendai Darikwa is a more complete footballer. But Lass Sorensen is a lot younger. So if I could have one of them in our team now and for the future, I'd have Lass Sorensen because he'd be around for longer. And I appreciate that's a cop-out answer, but I'm sticking with it.
That is a cop-out answer because I am literally just going to go, which player would I rather start for Lincoln City on Saturday afternoon, this Saturday coming? That's where I'm leaving the answer. No sell on, no this, no that. I mean, obviously you'd go, based on your rationale, you'd go Lass because we can sell him for 500,000. The answer is Tendai. I think what he brings to the team as it is first rate. I like his experience. I mean, okay, we've questioned him for the goal, or he has been questioned for the goal. We haven't, but I thought he was excellent in spells yesterday. He's provided another assist. He's popped up with goals. We've been lucky enough to meet him as well. I think you didn't actually, did you? I spoke to him and he disappeared. You didn't get to speak to him, did you?
Very briefly, not as long as you did, but very briefly.
The size of Lass Sorensen's personality was a huge thing to have to try and fill. And I think with Tendai, I think we just did a brilliant job. And you can see why the club broke the structure of age and the type of player that we recruit in order to bring Tendai in. Chris Gooding has put a question to us. Can you see Sean Rowan being a potential exit in January? A left centre-back is much sought after these days.
It is. You're absolutely right. Everyone seems to want one, particularly anyone that plays a back three. Though what I will say is not that many teams are playing a back three in the Championship, so it might not be as suited to certain teams in the Championship. But good question. If he goes, it will be for a hell of a lot of money. He is out of contract in the summer, but is still of an age which would require compensation, and it would be a significant sum of compensation due to the fact he's been here for such a long time, made so many appearances, etc. So I can't see us selling Sean Rowan in January unless a a bid that we literally cannot turn down. And I mean a record-breaking bid that we have never seen in the likes of Lincoln City history before. So, no, I don't think so, would be my answer to that.
Yeah, I concur. So there's nothing really more to add to that. And Phil Harris says, what transfer activity do you anticipate during the January window? Now, I think this is an interesting question because Michael Skubala gave an interesting comment about what we would like to do and what we will do look very different. I can't remember the exact comment. I've got it somewhere.
It's what we'd like to do and what we need to do, I think, with the two.
That was it.
Phrases, weren't they?
And he obviously said it's a reactive window as well, rather than one for the future. So that suggests to me that they're looking at the squad and going to add where we need to add. I certainly think a centre-half is on the cards. Young, I'm not going to get. I don't think we're going to get a left-footed one, but I just think a younger centre-half, potentially a lone centre-half as well. I don't know if we'll be looking to do a permanent deal unless it's right, unless the right player is available. It could be that we look at something like the Cohen Bramwell and Regan Paul purchases, where somebody's coming to the end of their contract in League Two and we're looking to try and pull a bargain through, potentially. But I also think that we are going to be looking for a little bit of immediate impact at the top end of the pitch, because I have a sneaky suspicion that Sheffield Wednesday may think that Bailey Cadamarteri will be better placed elsewhere. And I think if that is the case, we will be looking at replacing him potentially with a lone player. And no, it won't be Joe Taylor.
I think that's really interesting. There's a massive discussion about that, isn't there? Because
I hope not, because we run 56 minutes.
Well, no, because we had a bit of a chat, didn't we, away from the podcast for the YouTube comments. So we've got a little bit of time to play with. But firstly, centre-back, yeah, agreed. I think it'll be someone that's going to come in to make an immediate impact, though, whether that be someone who's out of contract in the summer who we will pay a fee for, or someone who potentially a loan from that's maybe not getting many games in the Championship. But I don't think we'll see an 18-year-old centre-back come in. I think we'll see someone in their early to mid-20s coming on loan from a Championship team, if someone that's not playing, or we'll see someone who we want to bring in as maybe a long-term replacement for like an Adam Jackson or something.
I need to correct myself. Because I just have had a message. Bailey Cadamarteri cannot be recalled and loaned out elsewhere because he can only play for us or Sheffield Wednesday because he's already appeared for them this season. So I stand corrected.
There we go.
So even if they did fancy him elsewhere, he couldn't go elsewhere.
So the question is whether they want to keep him on their bench.
Want him back or not. Yeah.
If he's not playing as often as maybe they'd hope he would do. But he started on Saturday, scored a goal, and scored again, of course, on Tuesday night in the trophy. And I think it was always difficult, wasn't it? We've discussed this earlier, difficult to find which is the best partnership, which is the best two players to play in those roles. And it turns out maybe it's playing three of them. and if that's the case, maybe in certain games and certain systems, whatever, but it certainly worked in that first half on Saturday with Jovan and Bailey really complementing each other really well, with Ben just tucked in behind. That worked. There's no denying that worked. So I wouldn't be surprised to see us do that again, and therefore that would mean that Bailey is likely to get more minutes than he probably has been getting lately in the league. And if that's the case, then maybe he doesn't go back in the summer, in January. I suppose there's a couple of outside question marks, though, because Ben House is out of contract in the summer, I believe. Not 100% sure, but I think he might be.
I think so.
What happens there, because he of course is of an age where we wouldn't receive any compensation. He could leave for free in the summer, so maybe that's someone that you cash in on if you get a reasonable offer. But I don't know, maybe Ben's value is in the squad because he's quite unique. I don't know. That depends a little bit on where we find ourselves come the 1st of January. I think that might be quite a reactive one, as Michael said. There's obviously the Ethan Aran situation. We all know how good he is. We all know how much we want to keep him, but almost all of us know how he is absolutely destined for Championship football, whether that be with us or someone else. And we know that there's a fee there, that everyone knows the situation. He's happy here, but if a bid comes in of a certain value, then we will accept it, and it's up to Ethan whether he wants to leave or not. So that'd be a massive loss for us. So I think I can foresee a quiet window if Cadamarteri doesn't leave, House stays, Arahan stays. We just bring a centre back in, and we're pretty much good. or I could see a really busy window if the players that are looking to be out of contract towards the end of the season, we do receive bids for, and we have to do a little bit of immediate rebuilding. So it's really hard to predict, because I think this time last year, we all know what we needed. So we knew we was going to sign a centre forward or two. Freddie was out on loan doing so well at Wolves, so we knew he was almost certain to come back. We knew we was going to bring someone else in because we needed a centre forward. We knew what we needed and we got it done early. This time round, other than a centre back, there's probably quite a few other moving parts that we're not quite sure of here as fans.
Yeah, fair enough. I also wouldn't be entirely surprised if Rob Street didn't head out on loan to get some minutes into League Two, especially with Tyler Walker coming through as well. I think with Tyler Walker coming back into contention and being on the bench, it does leave Rob looking short of minutes. He's a 4-year contract. He's a long-term prospect. He's not a failure in any way whatsoever. But I think minutes in League Two would really benefit him. Where were we having a discussion about? Somebody said they thought Freddie Draper might go out. Was that in one of our group chats or the Discord? I have that many different chats and WhatsApps and things going on now. I don't know what's going on, but I can't see that happening at all. We do have one more question, and I really like this, and I'm going to have to keep clicking back, and I can't find it. I think it was Richard Scrafton. Said, how much would you pay to see Tom Pope batter Joey Barton? Now, this comes from Joey Barton, I think, he's looking at going into celebrity boxing, and he was putting a challenge out of some description. You look like you haven't actually seen this.
I haven't seen it. No, I don't really follow boxing, to be honest.
I don't follow Joey Barton.
No, well, Joey Barton obviously isn't going to get another role in football, is he, after his recent antics? So I suppose he's not got a lot else left, has he? I'm not a rich man, but I'd happily pay to see Joey Barton get knocked down a peg or two. So yeah, Tom Pope certainly would be he's actually I'm just having a look. He's having a right pop at literally everybody. My God, I haven't looked at his Twitter. This is awful. So he's basically called Matt Taylor a gimp today. He's called Tom Pope a mad shout from some lower non-league amoeba about boxing me. Pipe down like flies on a windscreen. I'll only box fellow full internationals or people with a full head of hair. Oh my God. Yeah, the answer is I wouldn't pay. Didn't Joey Barton get one England cap?
Yeah, one England cap. Yeah, I think he did.
Full internationals, clutching at straws there, isn't he? Jesus.
Oh, dearie me. I passionately dislike Joey Barton. He's a bully.
I think it's impossible to like him. Impossible to like him.
Didn't he start on Gab Sutton? If I remember correctly. He started on Gab Sutton, of all people. I mean, come on. I'm just looking at where he got his England cap. International career. He received a first full call-up on the 2nd of February for a friendly match against Spain. So he didn't even play a full game. He came on 78 minutes. 70. So he's a full international for 12 minutes. Honestly, that's crazy. I stood in the England under-21 lineup for a game once at Bradford City. We were playing France, I think, or Germany. We was mascots, and all the mascots stood with the England players. So technically, not in any real or literal sense, I've almost got as much international experience as Joey Barton. For the record.
Well, I almost have. I've only got 12 minutes less.
Yeah, same. Yeah. Oh, what a gem. Right, I think on that note, we should wrap up this week's edition of the Stacey West Podcast. We have basically deconstructed Huddersfield and left you probably feeling no better or no worse about it. If you were a glass half full, you'll still be a glass half full. If you're glass half empty, it'll still be half empty. But either way, you put those glasses side by side and they look absolutely identical. You've been treated this week to me and Chris disagreeing and agreeing to disagree. But deep down, we all know I was right. Ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls, up the imps.
Up the imps.